Hey y'all, hey, welcome back to my channel. It is Christian here, and you're tuned in for more of my 2 cents. If you are new to the channel, then welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by today. We will be getting into part two, well, episode two of the secrets of Hillsong. Okay, so, child, that's something in and of itself. But let's finish the welcome, okay? And if you are a returning my two center, thank you so much for coming back. I'm grateful to have you guys here. If you enjoyed the video or the content, please like it and subscribe to the channel. I would love to add you to my 2 cents crew. I'm gonna try to be very quick and succinct with this one. I ain't got it. I ain't got it, y'all. I ain't got it. I mean, like I started to take like notes, like copious notes, and trying to focus on this storyline for the second episode, and I just wasn't feeling it. I don't like what they was doing, and we'll talk about that. Okay, 3 points that matter most before I get into any topic. Number one, you're not alone. Number two, you're not crazy. Number three, God, your creator, still loves you, and I do too. So let's get into it. So if you missed part one review, go ahead and check that out first before we get to this one. I'm not gonna say that it really had that it's like following any specific like timeline, I guess, but it's kind of sporadically all over the place. Like they're kind of giving us history now into Carl Lentz and his wife Laura, their family background, how they got connected and started dating, Laura's connection to the Houstons, who are the founders of Hillsong and the ministry overall in Australia. And it gives background on them, but at the same time, it really didn't, to me, scratch the surface on the affair that actually broke the camel's back. Like, you know how they say the straw? Child, we did not find out about the straw, honey. We did not talk about the straw. And maybe they decided not to talk about the straw because sis did her interview rounds. They were like, no, Renine got to get her money in 2021 when she told, and that's what she's getting. They paid her dust on Hulu. How about that? Okay. All right. So let's get to it. So on the opening scene, or the opening screen, if you will, just like on the first one, the first episode, the second episode started with the scripture Psalm 41:9. Even my closest friend in whom I trusted, the one who ate my bread, has lifted his heel against me. Now this scripture, I'm like, oh, the irony here. So we're talking about the betrayal and the affair of Carl, because clearly Carl lifted his heel after eating the bread of Laura. Okay, Laura, is it child? Is it Laura or Lauren? I don't want to be out here calling his wife something that she not. Laura. So he betrayed his wife, and then at the end, this scripture fits because we think, or we get to see like the dissolution and the dissolvement of his relationship with Brian. Like, Brian had time, and Brian was gonna, he was finna save his brand at all costs. He was not playing with Carl. Okay, so this scripture is very befitting for like multiple occurrences in relationships within, or scandals, if you will, within this episode. So it goes in opening to say that the interviewer that was talking to him off camera, talking to Carl, asked, thousands of people followed you. How can people trust that you were authentic? And it was a very good question. It was a great question to ask, because I think a lot of times when things like this happen in church or in religious organizations, the first thing that a lot of people, especially the followers and the supporters of those people, think is, was anything you were saying or doing genuine, real, authentic? Was it really from God? Like, were you being used by God, or was it all an act, a farce? Like, what can we believe is real or fake, right? And so he said that he was a tough person to actually ask that question to, because he had a lot of secrets and he carried a lot of lies for a lot of years. And I think I think that's a fair answer, because to be honest with you, I wouldn't believe him if he said that everything he was saying was true and authentic. I'm kind of glad he did a little skip around a mulberry bush and didn't say, oh no, everything I said was authentic. You, like my mama and them used to say, you a lie and the truth ain't in you. So even what he was teaching in the midst of the scandal of things he was doing in the background, he knew it, but he wasn't living it. And so that to me is then it's inauthentic. There's no authenticity there. if you can preach it, but you don't actually practice it. And we have a lot of people who do that, and not just in church. I mean, in general, all the time, every day. Even some of us probably do it, right? But you're not committing things against covenants, right? You're not breaking vows. You're not harming people who decided to follow you or trust you based off of a considerable notion that you had devoted yourself to some belief system or took an oath to behave or engage a certain way. And so he was held to a higher standard. And that definitely was a very good question to open up with. Now, he did say that his life was a breach of trust to thousands of people. And he said, I failed at my wife and children, and Hillsong failed at that too. I don't know what that means. I really don't. Unless we, go into towards the end of the episode where he and his wife Laura talk about how they were handled in the whole, scandal coming out in the affair, how their requests were not honored to have there be discretion about what actually took place and why they left Hillsong. And so maybe that's what he means, that the church, Hillsong, failed his wife and his children as well, just like he did. But at the end of the day, I just think that as long as he takes accountability for his part, Hillsong gonna get what's coming to them. Like, let's be very clear here. These places have a way of being exposed, and this is one of those ways. Now, I will also say, and I'll probably say it again later in this video, it doesn't matter. People are going to keep going to the church. People are going to keep supporting, paying their tithes and offering, following the pastors and the leaders religiously and cultishly. This did not stop no show. This clown did not stop the circus. It is still traveling, and I'm sure they're still planting new circuses all across the US. So he was the blueprint, and he was also the fall guy. Now, in this episode, he would talk about like past traumas and things that he thought he was over, or things that he thought he was able to hide or suppress, but that really wasn't the case or the situation for him. He did get into talking about like how he developed his style of teaching and preaching, and how he was pretty much just thrown into it. He wasn't a good speaker. Well, I'm sorry, he knew he was a good speaker, and he did it whenever he had to, on the spot, and he was good at it. And I think that that's a key element that a lot of people don't understand, that that's how a lot of pastors come to exist. It's not a calling, okay? People are just gifted with speaking and orating. And if you know something, you can speak about it confidently, consistently, as if though you're a whole expert on it. And you can be an expert on it if you've studied it in and out, but that doesn't mean that you actually were called by God to do it. You're just self-appointed, right? I know a lot about the CPG industry because I am in the CPG industry. I do well at it, so I can speak to it to a very broad, like in-depth, great detail, probably too much for some people who don't understand it, and I will be considered an expert on the matter because I know a lot about it. What else is to be said about pastors here who have grown up in church their whole lives? They've seen what they need to do, how they need to act, what the next steps are to get promoted and pushed up, and they follow those steps. They follow the blueprint. He did that. He knew what he was being thrusted into, and he went along with it. And that, for me, makes me again feel as if though I personally, I feel sorry more for his family than I do for him, because he was groomed. Like, in watching this documentary and looking at the friendship he had with Brian Houston's sons in college, and then the relationship that Laura and her family had with Brian Houston's family, this was all a grooming process to expand. He was just like, he fit the bill, and they put him in place in order to expand their brand and make more money. And he had character flaws, as any human does. And so it's just very unfortunate because, a woman in the documentary mentioned something that I've heard time and time again. Like, different people have used this phrase: God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I always be like, can y'all please not say that again? Because it doesn't, to me, it doesn't mean anything. It's one of those things that sounds deep and profound, but it's so surface and basic because it's like, nah, I don't know, because some of y'all phones are on do not disturb when it comes to acting right and treating people right with, decency and respect at church. But then you all of a sudden got your phone on loud, 100% volume to hear the call of God, but you can't hear the call of treating people right, respecting people, you know, not being spiritually abusive, not isolating people emotionally, being intentionally divisive. Oh, okay. So with all of that, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. What's the difference? Like, don't play semantics and words with friends with me. Like, just tell me what you want me to believe, which is that you were called. We weren't on the conference call. Clearly, it was just a personal Zoom invite. You clearly the only one that got the link, and you still failed. So it's just not okay. But the member also said that the leaders of Hillsong calls and qualifies who they want. She was like, they used to always say the phrase, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. But she was like, the difference at Hillsong is the leaders of Hillsong calls and qualifies. They the ones doing the calling and they the ones doing the qualifying. They ain't waiting on God to do either. And that is so true. And that happens often in church. I've done a video before about pastors leaving their church to their children. Nepotism is running rampant in the body of Christ, right? It's just so unfortunate because you just start thinking about it like, dang, you was called, but you was just in the sound booth. Joel Osteen, you was called, but you was just playing the drums. Like, you was called, but you was just on the corner selling drums. You was called. Oh, okay. And so it just becomes this narrative that it's really not about God. But since you're sitting in the audience and you don't have any control, that's what we're going to try to lead you to believe. God called these people, even though we ordained them, we chose them. It's better for our business model if we get to put the person in place. That way that they still have to answer to us. We have trust with them. We have relationship. We're family. He ain't gonna go against us because we cool like that. And that's what it really be given in a lot of these churches. You're not getting a church or starting a church or planning a church because you were called. A lot of this stuff is just being handed down. It's being given to you because another pastor is planting a ministry or another franchise location in a different city that they don't live in, and they need somebody to man it and collect the tithes and offering for them. When you get your little cut and they get their franchise fee. And so it's very unfortunate because this is what Carl was. And I'm going to say this. I was taken aback by two things. His appearance in the documentary, like what he looks like now versus what he used to look like, which this is a picture of what he was looking like, when he was at the top of his game. This is like barefaced, but he had his little, goatee and his bird and all of that, Mr. Mess Your Life Up. He had that vibe going on. Um, but now what he looks like during this documentary, I was just like, okay, I can see he's kind of tapping into his earthy energy, still a little rock band flavor. But then when I started putting these pictures in to do this video, my God, I looked at my screen at this very picture and I was like, this motherfucker trying to look like Jesus. He knows what okay. I don't want to sound too deep at all, but I need y'all to understand discernment. I don't tout to be any kind of overly spiritual or deep person by any means, but I know my discernment, I do not miss. And I also have a psychology background. And I'm going to tell you guys the way he looks, yes, he probably grew his hair out just because whatever, that's his thing now. He's been off the scene for a couple of years and he has a different look. But given the level of narcissistic behavior he probably has displayed, the toxic traits that he did operate in as a pastor, the power, the manipulation, the control he had, the access, I'm gonna go with he's doing this intentionally. It's almost like a subconscious thing that he still has the appearance of a savior. He still has the appearance of a down to earth, lowly person like Jesus, right? Like the images. Let me say this. The images that we've been given of Jesus. Y'all cannot tell me that looking at this screen, this man ain't sitting up here looking like one of them damn pictures. And I went to Catholic school, so I saw the picture every day, at least 50, 11 times. In the hallway, in the cafeteria was a picture of Jesus. In my Catholic school, Sister Thea Bowman, Holy Angels. Okay? It was Holy Angels first, then it changed to Sister Thea Bowman. It was a Catholic school in Gary, Indiana, and Jesus was all around. And I ain't talking about the praise and worship song from Israel. Jesus was on everywhere. In all the classrooms, it was a picture of Jesus. I'm not lying to y'all. There just wasn't a picture of Jesus in a bathroom, but it was a picture of Jesus everywhere. And it looked like this. So I just found that interesting. I'm like, subconsciously, whether he knows he's doing it or not, or whether this is his intent, he definitely is going for the Jesus persona or vibe. And it's giving 0 stars to me. I don't like it. It feels like more emotional manipulation. I'm just telling y'all what I believe. It feels like emotional manipulation, which we know that he knows how to perform and do it well, consistently, to get the results and the reaction from those watching, listening under the sound of his voice. And so that's very, telling. And it's, it's just a lot. A lot goes into it, but I'm not going to discount that that's actually what's happening or what happened here that led to his imagery in this video and probably his decision overall to start walking around looking like Jesus. So let's get into Laura. So the documentary goes on to talk about how they met, and giving more of her background. So like for me, I really felt as if though, like after they broke down who she was and her background and her family's connection to Brian Houston and his family, the woman, I'm gonna call her girl, the woman literally said they were like a second set of parents to her. Brian Houston and his wife Bobby Houston were literally like a second set of parents. They were best friends. Her parents and Bobby and Brian Houston were best friends. And then she was best friends with their son, Joel. And yeah, they were inseparable. Like they were always at each other's homes. They did life together. They did church together. It really was giving Lifetime movie. I was kind of confused on how her and Carl got together, because I'm like, dang, the way that she's explaining this, these pictures they throwing back to and showing, it looked like her and Joel should have been the ones together. But that ain't what happened. And that's cool. That's fine. That didn't have to be. But my point is, it just shows that there was, again, like I said, the level of grooming. Like you're in place, you're married, you're dating one of our closest family friends' daughter. You're already in position. You came, to Hillsong College and you got ordained and you're a minister. We've been having you speak and come, and you bring rows and pews of friends, because they talked about how Carl Lentz used to invite rows of friends, like people he had just met out that day. He would be able to invite them to church and people would just come to church with him all the time, like 20 friends. It was nothing for him to get people to come. And so they pegged him. They pegged him as a great recruiter. He was an amazing recruiter, and not for the kingdom. Not for the kingdom, but for revenue. Okay. So as many AISs that you can have, the better. And you like, what is AISs? Asses and seats. The more of those, the better it is, right? So she was close, and they were pretty much an extension of her family. So Laura had an inroads to the Houstons, and she trusted them, and she loved them, and they were connected. And so it all just fell in line for her. And she shared how her and Carl got married at 23. They, once they met when they were in college, they fell in love very fast. I think she said they told each other they loved each other within like 2 weeks of talking. And that was it. That was that. And so Carl said that he thought that marriage would fix his internal desires to have sex, his attraction to other people. All of that was just going to be remedied from getting married to Laura. And that didn't happen. So he was literally struggling. I don't know if it was with his, I don't know if he never said he had a sexual addiction. So I don't want to put that on him, but he made it seem as if though getting married to her was supposed to curb some of the other stuff that he had obviously battled with in the past or up until meeting her. and he wanted to like put an end to that, but he never said that he struggled with it. But that's what can be assumed from saying that it was supposed to be a distraction to keep him from those desires, but that didn't happen, like I said, because as we can see now, his fall from grace came from, marital affairs, which is, very unfortunate, because on the outside looking in, a lot of people would easily say, oh, you should have known better, or you shouldn't have been so weak, and you had all of this and you gave this up for women. What are we talking about? This is human desire. This is just human relationship and connection. And it's not a bad thing. But the unfortunate part about it is, well, it's not a bad thing. It's not an uncommon thing. The unfortunate part about it is that there's no control, right? And by control, I mean self-control. You may have ideas or desires or thoughts or interests, but acting on them, understanding what you're jeopardizing, is when it becomes a bad decision, right? It's unfortunate to have those thoughts, especially when you're married, because the thought alone would hurt your spouse, period. It would hurt me if I knew my husband felt like that about another woman, and I'm sure it would hurt him if he knew that I felt like that about another man. But not acting on it is a totally different ball game from acting on it. And so for him, having the power and the access and the control that he did, he probably had a lot of desires that he was just like, I'm going to act on this. And whoever's closest that I can do it with, boom, here we go. And so we'll get into that later, because it was not just one affair here, people. Let's be very clear. So now we get into talking about his vulnerability and the relationship that he felt as if though he pretty much had to put on a facade, as if though he had it all together. And one of his quotes was, I'd rather be, and he said this in a clip on the show while preaching. They put a clip in of him preaching where he said, I'd rather be a man on my knees looking vulnerable than a man on my feet looking shaky, because somebody might know I don't have it all together. Well, it's very funny you would say that from the stage, because that's exactly what you were doing. You were standing up looking very shaky. But to people, you seemed like you were on your knees being very humble. You were doing what you wanted to do. And I'm not going to even really like harp on him having celebrity connections or being, worldly. I don't really care about that. He's a human. He can be friends with whosoever he desires. But what I will say is there's going to come a time when having that much access and that much power, even in those circles, will make any ground you're standing on shaky. And while you may not have tried someone else in those circles, you will seek or eventually break in having those desires and engaging in inappropriate relationships with people in your circle, because you have access to them and you have control over them, their minds. They already see you as a celebrity. They already feel graced and blessed to be in your presence. So making statements like this always blow my mind, because it's like, people who be saying this stuff be the ones actually doing this stuff. And I just wish that you would shut up. Like, if you're doing it, find something else to preach on. Like, say something different. Because when it comes out that you were doing the very thing that you were speaking against, that's when it makes God look bad. Although it shouldn't. It shouldn't. God is not a problem in none of this Hillsong debauchery, whatever's going on here. This has nothing to do with God. Let's remove that element of the creator from it, right? This is man's doing. This is watching man's tower or kingdom, if you will, fall because of their own selfish greed and desire to have power. And what the church has been so good at doing for so long is creating a narrative that is a system set up to help you live your best life, when it's not. It is set up for someone else to control your will, your mind, your emotion, your intellect, for their better good, for their greater good, for their ultimate purpose. They have a desire in their heart, and it starts with you. You got to come first in order for me to get to where I'm trying to be. And it's unfortunate. So with him saying that, the investigator, or one of the people that was being interviewed, he actually said, he was a writer and a journalist. He said what I was thinking. He said, there's no way when I was looking at him and I attended the service and I was just watching how he flowed, and he pretty much said he could find no flaw in the ministry when he went. This is what a writer said, an investigator. He was like, I couldn't find any flaw. It seemed like they were operating perfectly in that church. And he said at one point, he was just like, there's no way a man can exist with this much power and performance without it breaking him. It gets to a point where it's too much for one person to bear before it either goes to their head and they become just a whole dictator, right? And we get to Jim Jones level, or you're I don't want to say the opposite, where you're just like lowly, meek, and mild, and you don't bother nobody. But that could be a possibility, but highly unlikely. Because if you already deal with trauma and issues from the past that you haven't dealt with, you then become like whoever you are times 20. Like the scale just you're just off the scale, actually, because there's no reins for you. You are the head honcho. You are the one that would shut down someone else if it wasn't you. You can't, there's no regulation. He only ended up getting in trouble because it was public. But he could have gotten away with this if it was maybe on a smaller scale. But he decided to do it because it was something that it was in him. He had the opportunity, he had the options, that he went with it. And so with this investigator making that statement and saying there's no way a man can exist with this much power and performance without it breaking him, I totally understood that, because I'm like, yep, as it happens with most. Not all pastors do the things that Carl did. Many never are unfaithful. I'm not saying that. But power to a certain extent does end up going to a lot of people's head, where they end up being spiritually abusive, emotionally, mentally, financially. That happens. The power is exercised times 20 beyond what it should be, just for God's purpose. Something else creeps in there where, I don't know, people have like this piece in their brain that's just like, oh my God, I got this much power, this much control, these many people coming to hear me. It's ego. All of this is ego based. And your ego is just you identifying more with what you have and what you do than actually who you are. When you can just sit in who you are and like detach from what you have and what you do, that's when your ego doesn't control you. But your ego controls you when you only identify with, well, I do this, I do that. This is who I am. They know me for this. That's ego. And that's fine if you're okay with that for the confidence level, right? But then when you get to the point where you're overexerting, or you're overexalting yourself to where you feel like there's no boundaries, or nothing, no wrong that you can or can't do or be called on, that's when it's a problem. That's when it's a problem. And for him, Carl started noticing it. He did. He started noticing it, that too much they were growing too fast. So as the investigator said, a break is coming, right? There's going to be a break in this person with this much power and performance that they have to put on. And Carl felt the pressure. He felt the pressure. He referred to it as planning a party for 20 people and having 350 people show up. Like, the church was growing faster than he could actually keep up with. He didn't feel like they had the structure, the infrastructure within the church, the leadership, or the ability to keep up with how Hillsong NYC was growing, which speaks to a lot of things. He actually was doing what Brian wanted him to do. He was multiplying the investment. Like, he was the hit. He was the success that Brian believed he would be. That's why he picked him, right? He knew that people would follow him wherever he went. Brian could see that charisma in him, and he wanted that to be what started the U.S. leg of his Hillsong tour in church format, right? So Carl said he talked to Brian and told him that it was too much. He told him that he was doing 7 services a Sunday, and it was a lot for him. Like, he just felt like he was going to break. He couldn't do it anymore. And he said that Brian told him, when I was your age, I was doing 11 services. What? What is we doing? So now we're not safeguarding people, and we're not listening to what they're telling us, because is it money? Is it arrogance? Is it pride? Is it lack of compassion? What would make your response be to a grown man telling you that it's too much for him to keep doing 7 services, and you respond with, I was doing 11 when I was your age? And what does that mean? baby, can we get some more seats in the basement so we can just go back down to 2 services? And so that was pressure, where he felt as if though he had to keep going, he had to keep performing, but he knew that he was in over his head and that it was only a matter of time. And to me, I was like, okay, only a matter of time before what? Because I know that it can only mean one or two things, right? Before you just quit altogether, or before it just all goes to shit in general because you can't keep up with it. And that's where you just start understanding that for any one person to have all of this power and responsibility, it can become, um, how do you say that? It can become like overwhelming. He was overwhelmed. And even Carl explaining it in the, interview, he seemed overwhelmed just talking about it. Like you could just feel it, like he was. But he had to keep the machine, and he had to keep the machine going, and he had to keep feeding the beast. And the beast was Brian. I'm not trying to be rude, but that's who that was. So ultimately, guess who paid for it? Laura. Laura did. Laura paid for it. Yes, she did. Now, Carl had some addictive patterns, right? Well, he had some addictive patterns in behavior that didn't mix well with his diagnosis of ADHD, which he talked about. And I'm pretty sure this was his first time ever revealing that, which I thought was very vulnerable for him to do. But at the same time, I understand you have to be vulnerable. He decided he was going to share these things. And I want to believe that they're shared authentically without any ulterior motive to gain people's empathy, right? But at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, psychology will definitely insert that naturally from people just like being like, oh my goodness, wow, I can so see that, like how that was too much for you. That's what's gonna happen. Like people's hearts are going to be um like pierced, if you will, by this. So he shared how he was diagnosed with ADHD in college, and he was on prescription drugs, and he has been on them ever since, but people didn't know. No one knew that he was on them. And it would be around the time that the church was growing exponentially fast. It was too much for him. He just felt like he couldn't keep up. Brian didn't give a damn. And by this time, we're at 2020, and that's when he's reported. Like a staffer reported that they found incriminating text messages to Renine, which was the mistress and the affair that he had that was public. Now, this is the one that was public, but he had another one. My God, my God. And this is the part where I kind of was shocked, where I'm like, okay, well, they ain't really spend that much time on Renine, honey. They gave Renine a couple of seconds of a picture, and that was it. Like, they ain't really talk about her. They, did put like a couple of clips of her interview. I mean, very brief, 3 seconds maybe. Of her interview, but they didn't go in depth, and he didn't go in depth. Like he didn't talk about what happened, how they met, what the affair consisted of, what kind of space he was in when he did it, what was his thought process. None of that. They really kind of brushed over the details of that affair and focused more on the effect that it had on his marriage. And I guess, like, to be fair, that's fine in respect to his marriage, since he did decide to be a part of this documentary, him and his wife. But I'm gonna tell y'all this. I wanted him to say something. I wanted him to answer some questions, honey. I did. I wanted to hear his side of what happened with Rainine. Like, where you find her? Why was she the one? How long was y'all talking before you decided you was gonna go that far? Why was you lying about who you were and what you did? You told this woman you was a whole talent or sports talent agent or something like that. You told her not to Google you. Like, who tells you? The day that I meet somebody and we're talking and they're like, but don't Google me though. What? Okay. 3 seconds later, immediately Googled your ass. I didn't immediately look you up and left the premises. I looked you up and I left. Like, no, what are we talking about? So like even her allegations of what happened and how he manipulated her, I would have loved for him to have answered some of that stuff. But given the disposition that he had, you could tell that he was like very much on the edge. It just felt like a very anxious experience. Like at some points in the video or the documentary, I was just like, he does not look well. And maybe he's just nervous, right? But I'm just like, we need to pray for him. Hold hands. That's what he look like. He look like he need a good old Southern Baptist circle formed around him to pray. Cause I feel like it's something else going on. It's and again, he could just be nervous. This is his first time revealing himself and being vulnerable. So he has a lot on the line right now. But he got a new job with Michael Todd. So whatever that means. So in the revealing of the affair in 2020, he shared with his wife. So now we're going to get into this conversation. So he was ratted on, if you will. No, he was exposed by a staffer at Hillsong for incriminating text messages. And I was like, how did he get his phone number? How did he get this man's text messages to tell on him? That's what blew my mind. Because I'm like, do he be giving his phone to people like to take pictures? Do he have like an assistant that like sends messages or checks his email from his phone? Like what? How does, I don't know how that happened. But anyway, he and Laura, they both shared the day that he revealed the affair to her. And she said her first question to him was, do you love her? And I don't recall her saying whether or not he answered, but that was her response. And she said immediately after that, she thought about her kids. And then she said, as crazy as it sounds, I thought about the church and the staff next. And I'm just like, wow, that's just how big of a part of their lives that Hillsong was, that would be the next thing, or one of the things you think about after your husband revealing that he's had an affair on you. Like, what about the church and the staff? What about these hands? What about these hands that are rated E for everyone, right? Like, what? I couldn't care less. But that was their life, which was very sad to me, because I'm like, here's a woman that is clearly her life is being shattered and her world is crumbling from this admission, and she's considering his position. She's considering other people. And it's just unfortunate, and what may come of this for her family. And so it was just a lot. And as a woman, myself as a married woman, I'm just so able to sympathize with her, honestly, because I'm just like, I know that was so crushing. And she said that it was so crushing. And Carl said that he would never recover from the sound of her voice when he told her, and he'll forever remember the way that she cried. And I'm like, yep, she probably felt her chest cave in. Like, I know that feeling. I know the feeling that she probably had. And some of y'all listening to this who's ever been broken up with, hurt, cheated on, lied to, whatever, you probably know this feeling too, where you're cold and you're hot at the same time. You kind of have chills, but you're sweating. You're confused. You want to cry. You want to scream. You want to run. You want to ball up and hide. You want to crawl inside yourself, but get out of your skin. It's a lot, y'all, that goes on. And she deserves all her flowers for being on this camera. Because little Jesus Jr. with this hair would have had to sit there by himself. I mean, she wasn't sitting next to him, but I'm saying he would have been the only one that said yes to the interview. But obviously they've gone through counseling and they're on their journey of healing. So good for her, right? If she's happy, good for her for being able to heal and talk about this. And he said that he was not fully honest with her at the time. So what he told her about and confessed to as far as the Reneen affair, baby, it was more. It was more to the story. And she said, they went on to next talk about the Zoom call. So he said that night he also called Brian and told him, I'm in trouble and I'm not doing well. And Brian told him, okay, I am going to, we're going to get on the call with the board and figure it out, right? Like go over next steps. And he said Brian like sounded totally fine. He wasn't like angry at him or anything like that. But he just felt in his mind like, okay, this is still my church. We're going to get through this pretty much. He felt like he was going to be able to, skate through this like he was on, ATL or something with T.I. and Lauren London. He thought he was finna bust a little skate move and going back in the pulpit or back on the stage. Not so fast. So they had the Zoom board call meeting. They had the Zoom call board meeting, right? And on the call, he was asked about their nanny, Leona. This man of God done been sleeping with the nanny, y'all. He was sleeping with the nanny, y'all. Let me go ahead and give y'all spoiler alert. Don't watch this if you don't want spoilers. He had been sleeping with the nanny. Now, Laura didn't know. She wasn't confirmed in this, but she knew about the inappropriate interaction. So let me go ahead and tell y'all. So Leona is a pastor's wife too of Hillsong Boston. They just had too many churches. Hillsong Boston had a pastor, Josh Kynes, I believe. That was their last name, or Kynes, Kines, or Kimes, whatever. So Leona was married to a pastor of Hillsong too, a lead pastor. But get this, Leona got her a nanny for her children from within the church. Another young girl was watching her kids while Leona was the pastor for Carl's kids. But not the pastor, the nanny. Leona had a nanny for her family as a pastor's wife herself, and she also was a nanny for her pastor's family. It don't make no sense, y'all, but this is what was going on. Okay, it's giving very much my great auntie's brother's son is my second cousin on my granddaddy's grandma's side. That's what it was giving when I was watching. I'm like, what? Leona got a pastor for a husband, but she got a nanny so she can go nanny's Carl kids? Baby, ain't no way. Ain't no way. So Leona is over there at the Lentz's house, okay? She over there at the Lentz's house, frolicking around all up in Laura's space, all up in Laura's home as a grown woman over there on Christmas Day. And Laura was like, she used to be like, oh no, you can go home. You don't have to be here. We're good. And Leona was like, oh no, I have a babysitter. I'm fine. It's not a problem. Of course it's not a problem. Of course you don't want to go home to your man. You over here with your man. You already at home with your man. My man is your man, and your man is my man, and my man is your man on the weekend. Oh, child, I wasn't trying to be petty. I had no intentions. This is not in my notes. But I'm telling y'all, blew my mind, the game. So let's get into the juiciness of it all, because this part was good, okay? The women had to bring the goodness and mercy to this documentary because it was giving dry. It was giving very much who made the pound cake because it was dry. But Laura brought the juice, okay? So Laura found them in a compromising position one night. She said she walked in the room and saw them in a compromising position. She didn't say what it was, but baby, Laura was like, and I'm knucking and bucking and ready to fight. Laura knucked because she was buck. Nora pulled a me, okay? If I see it, it's on sight. It was giving very much Jamila Gooden, okay? I'm coming for that ass. Laura did not play. Laura did not play. Laura said she found them in a compromising position and she pushed Carl. She walked over to him and pushed him. And then she said she jumped on Liana and punched her in the face. My God, my God. The ministry of laying hands that Laura operates in is phenomenal. I believe she's called, she's chosen, and she's qualified. Won't he do it? Let her lead praise and worship next time. Bring them up to the altar and let them get slain in the spirit. Girl, when she said she jumped on this woman, I knew. Let me put her picture up. There we go. Laura. Laura, would you like another piece of cornbread, baby? You can have another piece of cornbread. You got another piece of cornbread and another fried chicken wing. Because at this point, okay, she did what needed to be done. And I know y'all probably want me to say that I'm not for violence, but I am, as a married woman, definitely giving hands. Let me see them hands. Okay. Toby told y'all, try Jesus, not me. I throw hands. I think that the human side of this is beautiful for her. When it comes to any spouse being unfaithful and their significant other gets to speak out and be authentically true in their emotion and what they were going through in their process, I will always champion that. What I wouldn't have championed was if they were on this screen together talking about it and her feeling like she had to draw back and not really open up about how she felt about the Leona affair. You saw what you saw and you did what you did. Tell us what you did, Laura. because we want to hear from you, baby. We're here for you. Rub her back, give her a peppermint. Okay, get her some cranberry juice like we used to do the evangelists. The little ocean spray bottles. We know what it is. Girl, yes. Because as a woman, you feel that like I would not have related to or respected if they would have kind of like muted her true response. Because as a woman, as any person, a woman or a man, you filing on whoever it is on site. Some people may leave, but I'm telling you, I have not reached that level of maturity or whatever you want to call it. Don't play with me like that. Like, it's definitely giving in this order, okay? But don't try any of these people in no particular order. My children, my husband, my mother. My children, my husband, or my mother. Okay. So, yeah, she did the right thing. She honored her vows. Even though he didn't honor his, she did what she was supposed to do to, get the point across to Leona in her home. If she caught them in a compromising position, maybe he was behind her, maybe he was holding her, maybe they were doing something they shouldn't have been doing, but Laura knew in that moment that she was being disrespected in her home, and she handled that. So Laura said she broke her pinky finger that night. And she said that Leona was like, I'm just going to leave because I'm not going to stay here to be accused of something I'm not doing. Girl, what? Ma'am, if you weren't doing none, press charges. Press charges, child. We could fight it out till the police come, and we could talk about it when they get here. I talk about it because your lips gonna be messed up. You gonna leave because you ain't do nothing. You know why you leaving, girl. Stop playing with me. So Leona left. Leona left the house, okay? But guess what? Leona came back. Leona kept working for the Lentzes. So now we got Laura, Leona, and Carl Lentz. We got 3 Lentzes playing in the house, playing house in my house. So she said that she kept coming over. She continued to watch the kids. She continued to be in her house. I don't understand that. So pretty much, Laura was being gaslit. They never discussed the situation again. They never discussed her punching this woman in the face or her pushing Carl or what she saw in her home. They did not discuss it. Being swept under the rug, being ignored because you knew that it was true what you saw your husband do. You knew it was. So she described it as being tormented in her own home. She was being tormented because both of them, both Leona and Carl, were pretty much treating her as if though she was imagining things. What she thought was happening wasn't happening, but she knew it was happening. And this woman was still watching her kids. It would have been a hell to the no, to the no. Like, girl, no. When I tell you them kids would have been everywhere that we went, everywhere. They would have been right on the front row with all of us. They wouldn't have had no nanny. What are we talking about? No nanny. No, they would have had a nanny cam. We could leave them at home and put a camera on them if they old enough for that. But no, it wouldn't be no more no more nannies. So on that Zoom call, that's when Brian and the board actually presented the Leona affair. They not only knew about Rainine at this point, but they now revealed they knew about Leona too. And that's when Laura found out that what she had thought Carl was doing, he was indeed doing. He was sleeping with Leona, whatever her name is. That she was getting it too. She was getting the Hillsong, all right. So at that point, Laura's broken. She's broken, and their child actually, which was again extremely vulnerable to share this on this documentary. But she shared that one of their children, I believe one of their daughters, had been rushed to the emergency room following the break of this story and the media getting it and all of that and them being fired. One of their children actually took a lot of pills to unalive herself. And she was in the emergency room, and she said she called or text Bobby and Brian. She communicated with them and asked them to spare as much of the details as possible because their daughter had taken, a turn for the worse, and it was too much for her. It was too much pressure, and they had been advised by doctors that if any more details or anything else comes out that could be more triggering, it could cause her life. And they didn't want that. And so they showed the text thread, like where Laura texted that, and then where Bobby or Brian, one of them, responded and said, we totally understand. We'll take this to the people who are making these tough decisions right now, whatever. Pretty much like we'll see what we can do. We'll try, to be discreet. Baby, when I tell you They didn't give a damn. They didn't give a damn. They didn't give a damn. They did not. Because Brian sang like a canary. Do you hear me? Sir was out here doing the interviews. Sir was out here releasing the footage. He was out here leaking tapes, confidential conversations, and making it very clear that they were resigning, that even though Carl was let go, Laura wasn't. She resigned. She was in the process of resigning anyway. What? And then both Laura and Carl confirmed, no, baby, we was definitely let go. We was not. It was not no resignation on our impartation. We was removed. Okay. And so yeah, needless to say, they did not honor the request that Laura made as a concerned mother for her child. And I don't know, like, as far as the humanity side goes, I think that they could have been handled better, to be honest with you. But I think that, as is stated in this documentary, that Brian wanted to really put a couple of extra nails in the coffin so that Carl couldn't get back up. And it's so funny, the irony. I wasn't even trying to say, I mean, the pun is just here. Since he's sitting up here looking like little baby Jesus, then it would have been the nails, right, in the hands and feet. But don't worry about me. I respect the pictures and I respect the story, so I ain't gonna mess with that. But it seemed like Brian really wanted to put the nails in both hands to make sure he couldn't go nowhere after this. So they both Laura and Carl described that they wanted to, well, they expressed at this time they wanted to, unalive themselves. They didn't want to be here anymore. Like he said, he didn't want to be on the planet. Like he wasn't trying to be here at all, honey. He didn't even want to be a parcel of grass. He was done. And that's understandable. Like to have your life, your world come crashing down. It was just another messy public story to us, but to him, this was his life. And so I have to respect that. Like to be straight up with you. As a human, I understand I don't gloat in anyone's oh my goodness, just utter destruction of their lives. This man's life was torn up, okay, and definitely by his choice. So I'm not saying anything about that, but it was probably handled pretty trash, like on the back end that we probably don't know about. That's why they're sharing this. So Carl's story, he shares a story of broken trust and patterns of secrecy in his life, where as a child, in the midst of all of this, all of these emotions and this reality and truth just came back to him of, I'm defending people who don't want to defend me. Like I've been defending Brian and Hillsong and the brand and the church and all of this, and they're not going to look out for me. They're not protecting me. And it was a lot for him. And that's when he did. He shared the story of, how he was essayed as a child. He was abused by a family member, by a friend, by a family friend. And he was told to keep it a secret, and he never shared it with his parents or anything like that because he didn't want to hurt anyone. And so that level of secrecy for him obviously was just a pattern throughout his life as an adult, as a pastor, as a husband, where he just kept that going, like secrets piling up, building up, keep it to yourself, suppress it, do whatever you have to do, which he said he'd done with the instance from his childhood. He suppressed it. And then, of course, you have things that come up, to the surface. You have situations that occur and happen that trigger you and bring things back. And you start doing things that you're probably not supposed to do or people won't expect from you. And you keep it to yourself. Shh, keep it on the low. But I think the unfortunate part about it is when you keep things like this to yourself, even your past, and you share it now, it makes people question, like, are you sharing this now for this response, or are you sharing it because it really is a part of your healing journey? Because we can't, as the audience, always decipher the two. Intent can never be determined by the person that's viewing or hearing it. We don't know what his intent is for sharing what happened to him in his childhood. We can only hope, right, that no one would not lie, but no one would share that only to get you on their side and forget everything else they did and say, oh, I see why he lied and cheated on his wife 2 times and was having extramarital affairs and being manipulative and da-da-da. It just is what it is. That's his background and his story, and we're not going to pick it apart, right? So after the firing, Leona then wrote a piece where she stated that she was abused. She was sexually abused by Carl, and she was manipulated, and she was pretty much threatened to not have a job if she didn't sleep with him, and she was subjected to being touched inappropriately when she was at his home, and she threatened to quit. And he asked her, where do you think, without a degree, where do you think you would get hired in New York City, right? To which he said that ultimately, even though what he did was wrong, he know for a fact that she did not experience any abuse at his hands. Okay? He said he did not abuse her, and it was mutually consensual between them as two adults. And I'm going to tell y'all something. I believe Carl. You won't know why? Because Carl is at the end of the road. This is the end. Okay? This is the end, like the GPS. Turn at the end of the road. At the end of the road. This is the end of the road that Boyz II Men was singing about. So we're going to let him have it. Leona was probably trying to save her family, her marriage, her ministry, right? Because her husband's a lead pastor at Boston, Hillsong Boston. So this kind of stuff has a narrative. Like it's trash, but that's the truth of that situation. So it's very unfortunate to know that he was sleeping with someone in his home that was watching his children that his wife trusted. That hurts. That probably hurt more than Rainine, and I understand why she punched that girl. And I ain't finna say much more about it. There was a lot of things said, like towards the latter end, preparing for the third installment of this. And I have a lot of notes, but I ain't really finna go through all of them. The key points that I will make and talk about is they did mention and talk about spiritual abuse, which is when a pastor or a leader that has power over you takes advantage of you. And I think that we should do a video. I will do a video on that talking about signs of spiritual abuse and, how to see it and how to remove yourself when you're under it, because it is very real. I think a lot of people ignore it because they just feel like God will do something to relieve them from the pressure or whatever's going on, but that ain't gonna happen. You need to get up and go, period. And then the person on the show, the writer, said something very important to me, a key point. He said after devastation like this, like what happened with Hillsong and with Carl and with Brian, people wake up to their complicity, being complicit in these kind of things. After they've gone through things like this and they remove themselves from it, then they start realizing how complicit they were in this stuff happening, period. And they start to try to reconcile within themselves and within their faith of how they got here. Like, okay, I ignored this because of this, and I was so close with them that I didn't see this. They start to reconcile, like, how did I ignore it, or how did I like overlook it, or how was it not that big of a deal? Because they're spiritual, or because they're a good person to themselves, they're a good person. And so it's sad because after devastation, people always try to excuse it away still, but they still try to make it make sense. There is nothing else to make sense other than you were brainwashed, you're in a cultish environment and an experience, and it wasn't your fault. But I can tell you this: once you wake up and you realize and you disconnect, don't go back. Don't go back. They did talk about cultural bias that was within the church. We talked about that in part 1 too, and more in depth. But I think that this gave the opportunity to Carl to talk about it from his perspective as the pastor. Like, what did you do to try to create more diversity in the ministry? Which he said that he felt like he did a good job, right? He felt like he did the best that he could to be diverse after it was brought to his attention. But there were people who continued to talk about there were no Black people in leadership. He even said it. I don't think it was intentional, but it was very obvious that across the global brand of Hillsong, there was not anyone, there was not a white male in leadership. Like, as a pastor, right? Let's be very clear. Y'all got 30 plus locations, and ain't nobody not white, ain't nobody not a man. Got it. So that was just a model that the church had. And he said at one point, this was very enlightening. It was like Carl was saying things without saying things. He was pretty much saying, I did my part at Hillsong NYC, but the rest of them jokers, that's who y'all need to be talking to. He told us without telling us that there's some racism going on at the Hillsong. Okay, shout to the Lord. All the earth, let us swing. Not sing, but swing. He said that there was a conference that Hillsong was hosting in Harlem. And he said that the entire lineup was white women. And he was like, we cannot do this. We cannot host a conference in Harlem that is minority, like heavy. It ain't us over here. Why would we come here and then just only have white women on the lineup? And so pretty much it was as if though they brought the Hillsong brand to NYC to colonize it. And one of the men who, you know, was a part of the investigation, he said that members had actually said that they no longer wanted Hillsong in NYC because they felt like they came and colonized it. Hillsong colonized New York, and people did not want them there anymore. And then to have Carl Lentz share the story of how, when he brought it to their attention that they should have black people, right? He didn't say it, but they should have black people on the conference, like at the conference in Harlem. He was met with resistance, and he was told, we are not going to cater to what other people think or specialize to certain races. So he said he pulled back. He didn't want that smoke. He didn't want that smoke. And that's just so telling of the culture and the mindset of an organization that seeks to attract all people, but then still want to have certain people over all people. Like, no, y'all can come in here and worship now, but what y'all not finna do is be up on this stage. What y'all not finna do is be controlling the finances, the singing. Yeah, like, no, y'all ain't finna be the front runners. By no means, we are not doing that. And he, you know, he knew that was a problem, but he felt as if though he did the best that he could with the resources he had, and that he realized he was never going to make everyone happy, no matter what changes he made. So the diversity could be seen and felt. He wasn't going to be able to please everyone. And so to that, again, I would say you do not and cannot judge people's intent. If he really did do what he said he did, or if he tried his best, we don't know. We can only believe what he said. And based off of the fact that we were having a documentary about you being a liar and a cheater, I don't know. So he definitely, he ended the conversation off with, I ran the church. Like, it was like having something that you run, but you don't really run it. Like, to the outside, we saw Carl Lentz as the pastor and the head honcho of Hillsong of NYC, but he wasn't. He was the front man, but he wasn't calling the shots. He wasn't that influential and that powerful. He was just he was the bait to get people to the seats, but he wasn't the end all be all. Things didn't just end with him, okay? But they did end him. Let's be clear. Give and take away. Next up, we're almost at a close, y'all. Whoo-cha. So we got a little history piece here to give character. This is like a character witness. My God, my God. This is a character witness. Good old Jeff Buck. Okay. Throwback Hillsong music director. He came on to talk about Brian's anger issues and his history of being trash, essentially, treating people poorly. This man decided that he was going to say yes to the interview. And I like when people with good, wholesome, clear spirits, you could just feel like he ain't got no reason to lie. Brian out here with a nice comb back. You know what I'm saying? He got his hair combed back and got a little wave to it. Jeff minding his business. Jeff is out here minding his business and probably still writing songs for people. We would probably be shocked who he probably got on his little catalog of songwriting credits. But Jeff shares how at his time at Hillsong, he was there from the beginning. Okay, started at the bottom, now we're here. Shout out to Drake. How Brian had a legendary history of anger. He called it legendary anger. He was an angry person, okay? And he spoke of how one time he told Brian that he felt as if though they were using people like too much, like to their capacity, that some of the people needed a break in the church, like workers, which we talked about that in part one, which is crazy because this is church culture, abusive church culture. Present day, Carl Lentz workers were saying they were overworked and underpaid and underappreciated, volunteerism, right? As volunteers. And now you have Jeff Bullock from the 70s, the 50s, child, whenever, saying that Brian was doing it too. Pattern of toxic behavior, church culture. Watch the videos that I posted. I'm telling y'all, this is a blueprint at this point. These people are trash, y'all. I'm not sorry. They're trash. And it's being exposed, but guess what? They will still have people by the droves at church this Sunday, nonetheless. So he spoke of how he told Brian that he felt as if though, people were just being used too much. People were tired. Brian told him pretty much, don't come at me. Like, I don't know who you think you are to be coming to me as senior leadership about members. Like, don't be coming to speak on their behalf. Okay? Don't do that. If they don't like it, they can leave and go somewhere else. That's what he said Brian told him when trying to advocate for members that's out here again making millions for your church as a choir and a music ministry. They can leave and go somewhere else if they don't like it. Okay. But it's to the people that were doing it, they were doing it as unto the Lord. But as the person they were doing it for real, didn't give a how they felt. Brian couldn't care less if he was running them people ragged to sing them songs in choir form. It was making him the money and giving him the imagery that he wanted globally, nationally, from Australia. And that's what he was okay with. And it's disgusting. So he spoke of how they went on a trip. And Brian had this, he liked to sit first class, living up in the sky. Shout out, okay, to our good old Fergie and Jack Harlow on the remix. Yeah, he was in first. Well, the seats were filled or something like that. And Jeff said that Brian decided to turn up on the person that was in the seat. Like, he snapped on a woman, was yelling at her and reduced her to tears and all this other stuff. And I don't know if he ended up getting the seat, but he snapped out. He spazzed. He went off on the person that was in the first class seat that he felt like he deserved. Okay. And so this is a pastor. This is a pastor who requires respect or requires to be, high and lifted up by his members, his congregants. But even in this church member, because Jeff, even though he was the minister of music or whatever, the music director, he was still a member. Even in him seeing that, is like, I would have been done. It's some character flaws of people in certain positions that you can see, and you're like, I don't feel the same way about you no more. Like, that's how it was for me with our pastor in Mississippi. When I saw how he treated his family, I ain't had no more respect for him. I had no more respect when I saw how he treated his wife, how he talked to his wife, how he treated his sons. Like, as a father, he was a better spiritual father to us in church, doing anything we called and asked him to do than he was for his own kids. But I digress. So it's like red flags like that don't be sending y'all to the exit sign in the church. Like, I ain't got to see you but one time snap on somebody that you supposed to be showing the love of Christ to for first class seat. Oh, okay. Unfortunate. So, long story short, he said that he was under a lot of pressure. Jeff was. He was under a lot of intense pressure to perform and to be somebody that he wasn't. He said that Brian wanted him to sing a certain way, to perform a certain way at church, and he said he just couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't be somebody else that he was not, and he decided to leave. And so he said, within months of him leaving, he had lost all of his friends, his church family, his wife left him, and Brian then put the cherry on top of the sundae like he did for Carl. He wrote a letter to all of the other church music directors, because you have to remember that the church in Australia was not the only church. It was the first one, but there were other Hillsong locations. He wrote all the other music directors and told them that they could no longer sing any songs that Jeff had wrote. Old ones and new ones, baby. Stop singing them. Okay? Trifling. Now, Jeff would go on to say that years later, he was invited out to dinner or lunch or something like that with someone that goes to Hillsong or used to go to Hillsong when he went. And he said the guy looked at him and said, "You know, we tried to destroy you, right?" And he was like, "Why?" And he said, "Because we thought you were going to bring us down." That's what he said. That this member of Hillsong told him he knew. This is I'm leaning in close, y'all. Y'all lean in too. Hear me, hear me, hear me, hear me. Everybody on the sound of my voice, hear me. When your pastor is able to use other members to help them in the mission to destroy you because you've left, you are brainwashed. When your pastor feels comfortable and confident enough to share things with you about a person you had a relationship in church with before they left, and you don't question the pastor, but instead you question the person you actually knew personally and had a relationship with, and turn against them because of your pastor, you're brainwashed. Because as an adult, as a person, you should be able to separate the two and say, "No, pastor, you wrong. You foul for that. No, nah. Should we be doing this to Jeff? I don't think I want to do this to Jeff. Jeff didn't do nothing but leave, child." But that's when you're brainwashed. You're in a cult. Because your leader has told you Jeff's gonna ruin us. What would Jeff do? How would Jeff ruin us as a church pastor? What we done did? What could Jeff say? That's what critical thinking allows you to do when you still have your own brain cells at church. You will then give some kind of rebuttal. You'll ask, even if you're not trying to be confrontational, you'll say, "Well, what could Jeff say, Pastor, that would hurt us?" What? And that's when your pastor probably would get pissed at you. Because they don't want to be questioned. But see, that's the kind of person I am and I was in church. What are you telling me this for? And what do you want me to do with what you told me? Because I got my own mind. I'm going to keep doing what I want to do regardless of what you told me. So to have a grown person tell you, "You know, we were trying to destroy you." We? Why was you in on it? I ain't do nothing to you. I can understand Brian probably feeling slighted. But you too? He got you to do it too? That's scary, y'all. But this is what happens in church. You trade in your mind for the indoctrination of a leader, of another human who came up with what they want you to do that will make them feel good. It's scary. It's scary. But I believe what Jeff said. Jeff lost all of his circle that was church focused and planted because he left. He made one choice to stand up for himself and not lose himself. And he understood it wasn't about God no more. This was about man. This man wanted to control him. I'm not letting you do that to me. And when he stood up for himself, he lost everything. And it's funny because in the church, they'll use the scripture, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" Ask your pastor that. Because when one person want to leave, it turns into a war of religion, a war against one member. Let these people go. What is giving Pharaoh energy? Let the people go. What if God really did start striking down these pastors just off principle that they don't want to let regular human everyday adults make their own decisions? If I don't want to come here no more, if I don't want to worship here, and I don't want to listen to you no more, let you be my leader, my overseer, my covering, whatever y'all calling yourselves today, overlords, masters, whatever. If I don't want to let you do that no more, why am I now the problem? I just decided to separate. I didn't do anything to you. A lot of the time, members who leave churches don't even try to start crusades and set their church ablaze. They just leave. But then, like this, they are then villainized to the rest of the people that remained so that their minds don't start to wonder, I wonder why Jeff left. Jeff was the minister of music. Now, something got to be wrong if he gone. That's what happened to us. Let me get to the next slide. So we're bringing it to a close here with the conversation that was had where people actually members stated that there was a rumor that Carl wanted to leave. He wanted to leave and that he was ready to wrap it up. He felt like it was time for him to move on. And Carl said it too. He knew that his time had come to move on from the ministry. And it was rumored that with him wanting to leave, Brian was scared. Essentially, he was scared and worried that if Carl left, he was going to be able to take members and money with him. And he didn't want that. And so Carl did do what he did. He definitely had the affair, but the reason and the only difference between Carl doing it and other past leaders doing it in Hillsong and getting the grace and mercy extended and not getting fired, the difference was that Carl had become bigger than Brian in the Hillsong brand. And allegedly, Brian didn't like that. And they use a great analogy when the student outshines the master. That's what Carl had begun to do. Carl began to outshine the master. The puppet was getting ready to cut his strings and start walking like a real boy. It wasn't giving Geppetto and Pinocchio no more. Wait, let me get to that little picture, honey. It wasn't getting to this, okay? I be getting to the money. Everybody mad. Yes, think I'm getting too much money. Come on, OT. Everybody mad. He wasn't gonna have it. You getting too much shine, too much light, too much time. It's time to fight. They had to get that wrapped up. And they did. And he gave them what they needed. So I mean, like, again, we're not caping for him as if though he didn't do anything. To be honest with you, I wish more pastors who cheated and did disgusting things, stole from the church, got members pregnant. I wish all of these people would get fired, but they don't. So to me, I do not feel bad that Carl Lenz lost his ministry that was given to him anyway. I don't care. I just feel that it's a lot of darkness that's supposed to be in the midst of what they consider light, and it's not. It's politics, it's money, it's capitalism, it's racism, it's sexism, it's classism, it's elitism. It's all of that wrapped up in church. And now they're on our screens fighting it out. And I mean, of course, for the sake of content, I'm reviewing it. But yeah, that's the close. That's the close of it here. Episode 2, again, like I said, the real goal of this whole episode was definitely sis here. Lori gets the gold star for that. Because she put them paws on Liana. Them paws on Liana. Them paws on Liana. Liana got them hands, and she deserved it, because you're not going to be in a compromising position with my man in my house, Lord. Not my house, God. Not my house. But yeah. So check it out. Check out part 2 of this documentary. It has been enlightening, to say the least. I don't know what I'm feeling like for part 3. I'm gonna take a break, not watch it tomorrow, but I will watch it on Thursday. So I'm gonna give myself a break, clear my mind, because I'm getting sick of watching these people. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, but I'm committed, because I actually want to see how this turns full circle. Because next week they're going to be talking about the history of Frank Houston, which is Brian Houston's father. His history of hiding things, scandals, and things like that. I don't know if we really need that history, because this stuff just is real. I ain't gonna say too much, but these people have a history of doing stuff like this, period. Just hiding their history and what they do, and then starting fresh and new like they ain't did it. And people just ignore the signs, and they ignore the information even when it's given, which is very scary to me. How people will continue to ignore what they're shown and what they're told with valuable proof. It's like you can get a lot of proof and still be like, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think I care. I don't think I care about what you're saying. And so it's scary, but it's real. So hopefully this wakes some people up. And even if it doesn't, it's entertaining for others. So thank y'all for watching. I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. If you enjoyed the video, like it, comment. I would love to continue the conversation down below. And subscribe to the channel. I love to add you to my 2 cents crew. Until next time, take care. Talk to y'all later. Bye.